They arrived under the cover of dusk, moving with the deliberate precision of those who have spent years training in the arts of evasion and secrecy. To the untrained eye, they would have appeared as ordinary travelers, perhaps a group of diplomats, researchers, or business professionals. But beneath this facade lay a very different purpose. These were not ordinary visitors. They were agents, individuals whose lives were built upon the delicate dance between visibility and disappearance. Each step they took was calculated, each glance measured, as though they were part of a grander design, invisible to those around them. Their journey took them deep into the heart of India, a land teeming with life and complexity. Here, the streets beat like arteries of a living organism, alive with millions of souls, each on their own journey. And yet, within this great and humming expanse, it is remarkably easy to disappear. Among the labyrinthine alleyways, ancient markets, and dense forests, those who wish to remain unseen often succeed. The agent's mission, though cloaked in layers of secrecy, was undoubtedly one that required supreme skill and absolute discretion. The very air they breathed was charged with the weight of their undertaking. They did not come for leisure, nor for discovery in the traditional sense. They came to pursue an objective so precise, so critical, that the risk of vanishing was perhaps a known possibility, a silent clause in the contract of their endeavour, and vanish they did, slowly, silently, and with a precision that mirrored their own careful methods. One by one, they slipped from the realm of the visible into the vast unknown. There were no signs of struggle, no urgent messages sent in the dark of night, no frantic calls for extraction. Just absence, growing void where once there had been presence. In a world so meticulously mapped and connected, their disappearance unfolded like a vanishing act performed by the land itself. One can only imagine the intricate geography they traversed. The remote mountain passes where the mists roll in thick and heavy, veiling the landscape in a soft, impenetrable white. The deep jungles where the chorus of life thrums endlessly, and where a single footprint can vanish in an instant beneath the shifting earth. Even the dense urban centres, with their rivers of humanity, provide the perfect camouflage for those who wish to dissolve into the crowd. It is a setting of infinite possibility, a stage where the distinction between hunter and hunted can shift in the blink of an eye. Some say they were taken. Others suggest they were betrayed, perhaps by forces close enough to know their names, but distant enough to watch them fall. Theories, like wild vines, grew thick in the absence of answers. Perhaps they were ensnared by rival intelligence networks, organizations equally adept at the delicate art of disappearance. Perhaps they stumbled upon something that should have remained untouched, a secret buried too deeply for the world to know. But there is another possibility, more unsettling in its quiet simplicity. It is that the disappearance was not an act of force, nor one of resistance, but rather the perfect operation, a mission so covert, so deeply planned, that even their own disappearance was part of its success. To vanish, to leave no trace, to become nothing, this may have been the ultimate objective, and so the story lingers, suspended in the still air like the faintest echo of footsteps long gone. No announcements were made, no clarifications offered. Governments watched, perhaps, but said nothing. Silence became the language of resolution. In the intricate ecosystems of both nature and nations, the most extraordinary events often leave behind no skeleton, no feather, no footprint. Sometimes what is most telling is not what is found, but what is absent. It is in this absence that the story breathes. It is in this quiet void that curiosity lingers, waiting, always waiting, for the truth that may never come. In the delicate balance of the natural world, when something vanishes, it leaves behind ripples, faint disturbances in the order of things. Yet, in this instance, there were no ripples, no trace, no footprint pressed into soft earth. 11 individuals, each trained to survive the harshest environments, to resist the most aggressive adversaries, simply ceased to exist. It is as though they stepped off the edge of the known world into a realm beyond our reach. In most disappearances there are fragments, abandoned equipment, a torn map, a hurried transmission crackling over faulty radio waves. But here the silence was absolute. The agents moved as shadows through crowded cities, through rural villages, and across untamed wilderness. And then, just as swiftly, they were gone. Their last known positions painted a curious pattern, scattered across vast and disconnected territories. Some were reportedly operating in the crumbling corridors of ancient temples, places where the stones themselves have stories older than any living memory. Others were seen, fleetingly, in the chaotic pulse of city life, their faces briefly caught on grainy security footage, their figures soon lost in the ocean of moving bodies, and yet, the next moment, nothing. There were no distress signals, no calls for backup, no evidence of a scuffle, a pursuit, or an ambush. Communication lines, meticulously maintained by trained hands, simply went dark, as though a switch had been flipped by an unseen force. It is in this seamless disappearance that the story's most unsettling element reveals itself, because nature, even in its most predatory form, leaves behind signs, a broken twig, a trail of disturbed dust, the faint scent of fear. But here the trail evaporated, as though the agents were never there at all. Intelligence, networks, even those as sophisticated as Israel's, rely on a complex lattice of checks and contacts, methods designed to safeguard operatives in the field. And yet all of these safeguards failed. 11 human beings, each tethered to intricate security frameworks, slipped from the grid as if plucked by invisible hands. One would expect the frantic scramble of recovery teams, the churning machinery of international intelligence bearing down on the point of last contact. But even here the silence continued. Perhaps it was a silence chosen deliberately, the kind of silence that blankets situations too volatile to expose. Speculation soon began to take root. Some whispered of an elaborate ambush, orchestrated by rival forces, capable of countering even the most advanced espionage techniques. Others suggested that these agents stumbled upon something they should not have seen, something that demanded their sudden erasure. A few proposed that the agents were not eliminated at all, but instead turned, absorbed into the very forces they had been sent to investigate, their allegiances dissolved like ink in water. But among these theories lies another, perhaps more unsettling possibility, that their disappearance was not the work of man, but the work of place. India, with its vast jungles, its sacred mountains, its ancient cities folded upon themselves like the rings of a great tree, holds secrets that no map can chart. There are places where the dense canopy swallows the sky, where paths vanish beneath the encroaching undergrowth within hours, where entire villages dissolve into the forest, their stories carried away by the wind. There are places where to search is to become lost, where to follow is to vanish. It is not simply the complexity of the land, but the nature of disappearance itself. In ecosystems across the planet, there are species that have mastered the art of absence. The leaf insect, indistinguishable from its surroundings, the octopus, dissolving into the colors of coral, the snow leopard, whose ghost-like presence leaves only the faintest hint of passage. These agents, it seems, became ghosts of their own making, consumed not by conflict, but by the perfect machinery of disappearance. One returned, but what he brought back was not clarity. His mind, once sharp and disciplined, was now fractured. He had no map to offer, no sequence of events to unfold. He was not the missing piece, but another question, a living fragment of a story that would never be whole. The disappearance of 11 agents remains, not a tragedy marked by evidence, but an echo, fading into the background noise of a world that continues, oblivious, as though they had never been there at all. When nature presents a mystery, the mind instinctively reaches for an explanation. In the quiet forests, the missing bird may have been taken by a silent predator. In the deep oceans, the vanished fish may have succumbed to the unseen jaws of a larger hunter. And so, too, in the affairs of men, when individuals disappear, we search for patterns, for answers that might bring order to the chaos. Yet sometimes what remains are only theories, fragile constructs we assemble to hold back the weight of the unknown. The disappearance of 11 agents in India did not pass unnoticed by those who dwell in the silent chambers of power. Whispers soon filled the void, swirling like dry leaves caught in the wind. The question was simple: who had the knowledge, the capability, the reach to erase these individuals so completely? And in response came the theories, each one weaving its own intricate tapestry of possibility. Some pointed swiftly to the most obvious adversaries, rival intelligence agencies always watching, always probing. The theater of espionage, after all, is one of shadows layered upon shadows, where even friends may not be entirely what they seem. Could it have been a calculated operation, executed with precision by an opposing force, one that anticipated every movement, every secret rendezvous? If so, the agents would not have faced an accidental fate, but one meticulously arranged by an invisible hand, the result of a game played with ruthless intent. Others ventured further into the realm of local complexities. India, with its mosaic of interests, its tangled web of regional powers, factions, and clandestine groups, may have produced actors not catalogued in the usual intelligence directories. Perhaps the agents encountered forces indigenous to the land, hidden organizations steeped in ancient knowledge, operating outside the known systems of surveillance, entities that neither craved attention nor feared consequence. In such landscapes, local intelligence can be just as formidable, just as quiet, and perhaps even more patient. And then there are those who suggest betrayal, a theory as old as human history itself. The idea that the greatest threats sometimes reside within, that perhaps the seeds of disappearance were planted not by enemies but by allies, cultivated carefully until the mission unraveled from the inside. Betrayal in the world of espionage is not always a dramatic revelation. Sometimes it is a simple misstep, a coded message sent too soon, a whispered name to the wrong ear, small cracks in loyalty that, under the right pressure, split the entire foundation apart. But among all these threads of speculation, another darker idea persists, the notion that the agents may have become part of something they could not escape, not through force, but through transformation. That they encountered a truth so powerful, so consuming, that they chose not to return. In the intricate layers of human behavior, loyalty can shift like sand underfoot. A mission can alter not only one's circumstances, but one's very allegiance. Perhaps they became what they were sent to observe. Perhaps they disappeared because they no longer wished to be found. Yet, amid the grandeur of these theories, there is always the humbler possibility that their fate was not the product of grand conspiracies, but of chance. A wrong turn on a quiet road, an unexpected illness in a remote village, a simple accident lost in the vastness of India's unforgiving terrains. In nature, the disappearance of a single creature is sometimes the result of no more than a gust of wind, a sudden slip, the silent descent of night. Could it be that the agents, for all their training and preparation, fell victim to the same indifferent randomness? What is perhaps most striking is the silence that followed. Neither Israel nor India offered clarity. No names were released, no memorials constructed. The absence of official acknowledgement created fertile ground for speculation to thrive unchecked, like vines creeping over ancient stone. In the world of intelligence, silence can be the loudest answer, the clearest signal that some stories are not meant to be recovered. And so, the agents remain where so many of nature's vanished inhabitants reside, in that curious space between fact and myth, between what we know and what we can only imagine. Theories, like species in an ecosystem, compete and evolve, but the truth drifts further from reach, like a rare bird slipping beyond the canopy, its wings soundless against the sky. Across the vast expanse of the Indian subcontinent, the landscape unfurls like a grand, living tapestry. From the roaring cities that pulse with relentless life to the dense jungles where silence reigns supreme, this land is not merely a backdrop, but a participant in the mysteries it harbors. The very geography itself possesses the power to cloak, to confuse, and at times to utterly consume those who dare to navigate its intricate pathways. Here, in the northern reaches, the Himalayas rise with a majesty that defies comprehension. Their peaks pierce the heavens, and their slopes remain treacherous, ever shifting beneath layers of snow and rock. In these altitudes, a man can vanish not by the hand of another, but by the quiet indifference of the mountain itself. Avalanches whisper down like the soft collapse of history, and within these folds, lives can be taken without a sound, their echoes smothered by the endless white. Further south, the jungles grow thick and ancient, pressing inwards like a living wall. In places like the Sundarbans, where tangled mangroves grip the earth, and the water itself seems to conspire against those who enter, the forest becomes a labyrinth. Visibility shrinks to mere meters. The air hangs heavy with moisture, each breath tasting of decay and salt. Here, the tiger prowls not as a beast to be hunted, but as the undisputed master of its domain. Yet, even more elusive than the great cat are the secrets the jungle guards. Entire settlements have been known to dissolve into these woods, swallowed without resistance, their names remembered only by the creeping vines that eventually claim their bones. And then there are the deserts. The great Thar, shimmering with heat, where the boundaries between the real and the imagined blur beneath the relentless sun. Tracks in the sand last but moments before they are swept away by the wind, as though the earth itself conspires to erase all memory of passage. Here one may walk in circles unknowingly, the horizon a perpetual mirage, a cruel deception that has bested even the most skilled of navigators. But perhaps the most deceptive terrain lies not in the wilderness, but in the teeming cities. Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata, urban jungles of extraordinary scale, where millions of lives interweave like the threads of an impossibly complex fabric. In these cities, anonymity is not only possible, it is inevitable. Among the crush of people, the layers of markets, temples, and winding alleyways, a person can disappear within seconds. A simple turn down the wrong street, a slip through a half-open door, and the individual is folded into the rhythm of the metropolis, unseen, unremarked, and utterly gone. It is within this geographical complexity that the agent's story becomes all the more haunting. Their training would have prepared them for many dangers. The watchful eye of an enemy, the sudden pulse of gunfire, the silent tale of a rival operative. But against the will of the landscape they may have been powerless, for in this land it is not always malice that takes. It is the land itself, with its oceans of green, its towers of stone, its endless crowd. It is the quiet hand of place that can swallow a man whole. The intricate terrain of India does not yield easily to seekers. Maps may capture its borders, but they cannot chart its secret places. The dense thickets where no satellite sees, the villages that drift beyond the reach of records, the pathways that appear one day and vanish the next beneath the creeping hands of nature. The agents, scattered across these varied frontiers, found themselves in a theatre far more unpredictable than any they may have faced before. The terrain was not just an obstacle, it was a living, shifting force, one that resists capture, that defies logic, and that leaves no ledger of who passes through. And in the rarest, most delicate corners of the natural world, disappearance is not always a product of violence. It can be the work of silence, of space, of terrain too vast to hold a single footprint. The forests, the deserts, the mountains, they do not betray what they have claimed. They remain still and patient, indifferent to the questions whispered by those who are left behind. There are moments in the grand theatre of international affairs where the silence speaks far louder than the proclamations of any government. A silence that is deliberate, curated, and fiercely preserved. When the story of the vanished agents began to surface in hushed circles, what followed was not the flurry of press briefings, nor the tightening of diplomatic ties in public forums. Instead, what emerged was a wall, one constructed not of stone, but of omission. A deliberate absence of words. Neither Israel nor India chose to step into the public gaze to acknowledge the events. There were no lists of names read aloud, no official statements of concern, no photographs pinned to the walls of foreign offices. It is in such silences that we find the quiet craftsmanship of nations that understand the weight of exposure. In the natural world, creatures often rely on camouflage to protect themselves. They blend into bark, into rock, into sand, until the predator's eye simply passes over them. So, too, in the world of covert operations, a nation may choose to hide not by deception, but by omission, by simply refusing to provide the contrast that would make the story visible. What is curious is that even the usual pulse of rumor and media speculation seemed restrained, as if an unspoken hand was guiding the narrative away from the public's grasp. Intelligence operations, by their very nature, thrive in the shadows. But here, the shadows were not just the backdrop. They were the method. The story itself became so obscured, so shrouded, that for many it flickered like a ghost on the edges of attention, present but impossible to seize. Why this silence? Why, when lives were at stake, did the official record remain so stubbornly blank? Perhaps it is because to acknowledge the missing would be to acknowledge the mission. To admit the presence of these agents would reveal that something of considerable magnitude had been at play. Silence, then, becomes a protective skin, a way of sealing the event away from prying eyes, from political consequences, from the inevitable spiral of public inquiry. In the wild, when a bird vanishes from its nest, the forest does not announce the loss. It does not call out in alarm. It simply continues, allowing the disappearance to fold into the rhythm of life. And perhaps the diplomatic silence surrounding this event serves a similar purpose, to allow the world to continue, undisturbed, as if the vanished agents had never set foot on Indian soil at all. Yet, this very absence of acknowledgement gives birth to something else. In nature, when the dominant species recedes, space is created for others to emerge. And in this vacuum of information, speculation bloomed wildly. Independent observers, journalists, clandestine sources, they filled the silence with theories, each more intricate and beguiling than the last. Some pointed to secret pacts between intelligence agencies. Others hinted at delicate diplomatic arrangements, too fragile to survive the glare of public scrutiny. A few ventured into realms of near myth, suggesting that the mission had stumbled upon forces or truths that neither nation was prepared to confront. Without an official narrative, the truth is left to drift, unanchored. It becomes a story not bound by fact, but by belief, by imagination, by the subtle power of suggestion. The silence does not kill the story. It preserves it, like a relic sealed in amber, protected but forever incomplete. And still the question lingers. In the intricate language of diplomacy, silence is rarely an accident. It is a signal carefully chosen, meticulously maintained. It is a strategy not of evasion, but of control. In the untamed ecosystems of the world, some creatures survive not by what they do, but by what they do not reveal. They leave no trail, no scent, no clue to their passage. They are known only by the gap they leave behind. So it is here. The silence is not empty. It is filled with the weight of choices made far from the public gaze, choices that protect secrets, choices that shape the story by leaving it unfinished. And in that unfinished space, the mystery breathes on, untouched by time, immune to the usual erosion of memory, forever suspended on the thin edge between the known and the unknowable. In rare moments, when a story seems to collapse in upon itself, a single thread sometimes remains, a remnant, a fragment, not of resolution, but of deeper mystery. Among the 12 agents dispatched across India's vast and unknowable terrains, one reappeared. A man, once honed by rigorous discipline, trained to endure, to observe, to resist, was discovered not in the triumphant return of an operative, but in a state of bewildering fragility. He was found in a remote village, far from the access points of his mission, far from the known or anticipated lines of escape. There, among the rhythm of simple daily life, he was no longer the embodiment of tactical precision. His mind, once sharp and methodical, now flickered with confusion. His memories lay scattered, as if some invisible hand had taken his story, torn it into delicate strips, and let them flutter away on the wind. His recovery posed more questions than it answered. No coherent account emerged. His words, when they came, were fragmented, drifting between languages and places, between the real and the unreal. His superiors must have pressed him, gently at first, and then with increasing urgency. What happened to the others? What did he see? How did he escape? But the man who returned could not, or would not, offer the clarity they sought. In nature, the survivor of a disrupted ecosystem often carries invisible scars. A lone animal returning to its habitat after a period of unexplained absence may bear no visible wound, yet its behavior changes. It forgets the pathways it once traveled. It stands still in the places where it once moved swiftly. Something is altered irreversibly, and so it was with this agent. His body was intact, but the map of his mind seemed to have been redrawn. What then had he encountered in those silent intervals beyond the reach of communication? In the field of intelligence, psychological disruption is not uncommon. Captivity, isolation, and interrogation can fray the edges of the strongest mind. Yet his condition did not fit neatly into the patterns of known trauma. There were no signs of physical harm, no evidence of restraint or coercion. It was as if something had simply been taken from him, without struggle, without force, leaving behind only the shell of a man whose purpose had been quietly erased. Such states of disorientation raise unsettling possibilities. Was he the victim of sophisticated psychological manipulation? Were his memories deliberately extracted or suppressed? Or did he stumble into something so incomprehensible that his mind itself recoiled, protecting him from recollection by sealing away the experience entirely? In the dense web of human memory, there are places where the mind refuses to tread, where doors are closed not by choice but by necessity. It is equally possible that his silence was not born of damage, but of intent. Perhaps he knew precisely what had occurred and chose with extraordinary discipline to protect that knowledge. In the world of covert operations, silence can be the ultimate shield, a fortress constructed not of stone but of sheer will, to preserve the secret at all costs, even at the cost of one's own coherence. Yet those who found him did not return with an answer. They returned with a man half present, half absent, his story half told, and even that half uncertain. His survival was both a gift and a curse. He was the thread that connected the known to the vanished, but he was also the puzzle piece that refused to fit, the key that turned no lock. His presence deepened the mystery, transforming it from a tale of simple disappearance into something altogether more elusive. In the natural world, there are creatures that return from perilous migrations, their feathers ruffled, their eyes a little wilder, their instincts dulled. We know they have survived, but we do not know what they have seen. Their silence, like his, is not an absence. It is a quiet wait, a reminder that there are places where understanding falters, where certainty dissolves. And so the lone agent, the last trace of a vanished team, remains a living testament to the story's incompleteness. He stands not as the answer, but as the enduring question, an echo of something that unfolded far beyond the grasp of our usual explanations, in a place where maps end and mystery begins. And so, as we trace the delicate threads of this story, 12 agents, an unspoken mission, and the silent vanishing of 11, we find ourselves not at a place of resolution, but standing instead at the edge of an unsolved mystery. The forests, the mountains, the crowded cities of India, and the intricate hands of unseen powers have woven a tale that leaves no solid trail to follow There are no confessions, no conclusive evidence, only the echoing absence of those who disappeared and the hollow silence of those who chose not to speak. Theories bloom where facts wither. Were they taken, betrayed, or absorbed by forces too complex to name? Did they vanish by the will of men, or by the quiet power of the landscape that conceals what it chooses to keep? In the end, perhaps the greatest lesson is not in the answers we sought, but in the realization that some stories resist discovery. Some vanish not because they are lost, but because they were never meant to be found. In the vast theatre of our world, where so much is mapped, measured, and understood, there still remain pockets of perfect secrecy, places where human endeavour meets the immovable weight of the unknown. And in that space, the story of the missing agents lingers, suspended like mist over a still lake, its shape shifting, its core forever just beyond reach.